Welcome to All the F Words,
a podcast where two writer friends, nearly 30 years apart, explore everything we give an F about. I'm Gabi Moskowitz.
And I'm Joanne Green. On each episode of All the F Words, we'll focus on a theme starting with the letter F. Things like failure, forgiveness, forgetting, and fake news.
We'll share stories from our lives and our distinct generational perspectives, and sometimes we'll look to the experts for insights and ideas.
Today we're going to talk about fidelity, the role that it plays in our relationships, and how it's changed over time. Fidelity is about commitment, and interestingly enough, I looked up online the word fidelity, and pages and pages and pages and pages of links about the financial world and fidelity investments and fidelity this and fidelity that. And one entry that was Merriam-Webster's definition of fidelity. And even there were, well, I don't have it in front of me, but there were three different definitions. So sure, I can pull it up. That doesn't take long at all. But one was about sexual fidelity. Mm-hmm. One was about, and this is just from memory, one was about fidelity to the facts, which I think about a lot right now because I'm writing a memoir and I want it to be a genuine story, but memory is a tricky thing. There's some fluidity to memory. And, you know, if you're showing fidelity to the facts, then you are stating exactly what happened.
Right.
So, right. And then there was a third definition, but I forgot because that starts with the letter F. But I'll look it up while we're talking.
Okay. Fidelity as a concept is something I've always been really interested in. I kind of think it's a little bit because my dad is a divorce lawyer and or a family attorney is a nice way of putting it. But he helps people divide up their stuff when they get divorced. He represents people who are ending their marriages. And my parents are still married. They've been married for almost 41, I guess. Yeah, I think they just had their 41st anniversary. And
as did we.
Congratulations, Mazel Tov. And I think that I didn't know much about divorce in my personal life as a kid, but I started to understand a lot about why people split up when I was young because of what my dad does for a living. And I've always been kind of fascinated by it. And in fact, the book I'm writing right now, there's an affair that is kind of the centerpiece of the story. And I've never cheated on anyone before. You know, we'll call it cheat. I've never been. How would you use it as a
unfaithful?
Unfaithful. But is there a form of the word fidelity? I've never been in.
Well, you could be an infidel, but I don't.
That's I have never strayed from a relationship before, but I have experienced it. I have been cheated on, and it's always been. I mean, it was terrible. We can talk about those stories, but you will. You certainly will. The concept of why people cheat. As someone who's kind of terrified of infidelity, the concept of why people cheat has always been really interesting to me. And the person probably the person who's most famous, at least in our contemporary world, for writing about infidelity is Esther Perel. And so I looked at a lot of stuff that she has said, and I thought that it was really interesting. Before we get into what she said, I want to tell you about some statistics that I learned about infidelity. In the United States, the General Social Survey, the GSS from 2020 found that while over 90% of Americans consider infidelity to be immoral, 30 to 40% of Americans have admitted to having cheated on their partners. And what was really interesting to me, and I would love for you to tell me any of your thoughts about this. As far as age range, who does the most cheating has a lot to do with age demographics. So people 18 to 34, 11% admitted to cheating. 35 to 64, age 35 to 64, it was 17%. And then 18% of people 65 and older admitted to having engaged in extramarital sex.
I'm shocked.
Super interesting. I'm curious. I'm curious what you think about that as the official representative.
I find it shocking. I find it absolutely shocking. I would have thought that the highest number, first of all, would have been in the 18 to 34 group.
Sure.
But I guess by the time people are 35 and up, and I would say primarily in their 40s, maybe 50s too, by then they're really sick of their spouse, or by then they really are in a present company excluded, of course, but that maybe by then they're just bored with their life and they need more excitement, or they're unhappy with other parts of their life, and so they think they need this spice. I'm just speculating, because I have to say at the beginning of this conversation, I don't get this at all. I don't get... first of all, I get desire, I get flirting, and I get coming home for dinner. So this has always been our rule. Like, doesn't matter where you get your appetite as long as you come home for dinner. Mm-hmm. But the idea of lying to the most important person in my life, first of all, lying is sort of anathema to me in general. I wear all my emotions on my sleeve. I am, if anything, an oversharer. And so the idea of having a secret life, or having, I can't even imagine the amount of energy it would take to create the lie and then to have to cover for yourself all over the place. I just don't know when or how one would do this successfully. And
it does sound
exhausting. I can't imagine. It sounds exhausting. And I also can't imagine having a relationship that you value and care about be built on untruths. I feel like I'm very naive when it comes to this, because I know that, and I even in my own life, people say to me, "Oh, well, don't tell my spouse about this," or "My spouse doesn't know this," and I always have this sort of incredulous look, like, "What, you're telling me something you haven't told your spouse? I don't want that responsibility."
Yeah.
So. Also, I think, I just don't understand why sex is that important to people, that they're willing to risk their relationship for what I assume is like a momentary thrill, or maybe something that makes them feel sexy. But then you'd have to counter that with all the guilt.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about what Esther Perel says about a lot of these questions. So I thought this was super interesting. So the first thing we have to understand about the way that modern fidelity and infidelity comes up is that marriage as an institution has changed tremendously, just even in the last 100 years. It used to be that you get married because it's time to get married, and it's kind of about building, even after arranged marriage as a frequent concept, at least in this part of the world, even after that, it was still, people were getting married much younger. They were getting married because they wanted to build adult lives, and that required a partner, and they wanted to have children. And it was not just about this concept of your one true love, there being the one. It just wasn't as talked about. It wasn't a concept that we relied on, the Disney movies and romantic comedies that really gave us this modern idea that we can have anything we want, and that we need to wait for the person who fulfills all of our desires. That didn't exist really as a concept. So we weren't expecting the same level of fulfillment from our spouses. So that's the first concept. The other thing was that we weren't living as long as we are living now. And so life with one person is lasting a lot longer than it used to. So what she talks about is the way that we have come to expect a much higher level of soul fulfillment from our partners, and when that is not met, we see it as a shortcoming of the relationship and of the partner. So that's one thing. The other thing she said is that so often the wanderlust that leads to affairs comes not from, it's not actually a symptom of the marriage itself, of a problem in the marriage itself. It's actually a symptom of the pursuer wanting to connect more deeply with a part of themselves. And so she says,
it makes sense. It actually makes sense.
Sometimes when we seek the gaze of another, she says, it's not our partner we're turning away from, but the person we have become. We are not looking for another lover so much as another version of ourselves. The Mexican essayist Octavio Paz described eroticism as a thirst for otherness. So often, the most intoxicating other that people discover in an affair is not a new partner, it's a new self. And I thought that was so profound. And I've had a few friends have extramarital relationships, and my experience has generally been that's really what it's more about. And it feels like what Esther Perel says is that it feels as though the object of the partner in the dalliance is that they are madly in love with this person, but really what's going on is they are falling in love with this part of themselves that is emerging. And I thought that was really profound.
It doesn't really matter in that it threatens the marriage in either case, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's the issue, is that it does. I think what I liked about the way that she spoke about it or wrote about it is that she really comes from a compassionate place. The issue, of course, is that in falling in love or engaging in extramarital sex, having an affair, you put your primary relationship, assuming that it's a monogamous one, you put it at serious risk. And so that's, of course, the flip side of this compassionate case for understanding.
Let me ask you a question. Does infidelity presuppose lying? In other words, if you are truthful about the fact that you're having this other relationship or sleeping with this other person, if you're truthful about that to your spouse, is it still considered infidelity?
You mean like in the context of like a polyamorous relationship?
It could be that. It could be being truthful about it after the fact. It could be even an agreement. I remember, and you'll tell me that this probably still happens, I'm sure, but in my life, I think of it as something that happened in the 60s and 70s and doesn't happen anymore, but I'm sure it does. Of a couple agreeing that, like, it's fine for you to have a delicious experience as long as it's not really an emotional connection. You can have, like a wild sexual encounter, but not if it's somebody that you really deeply care about and it threatens how you feel about me.
Yeah, people still do that.
Go figure.
I mean, I think that every relationship is different, and every relationship has its own, sets its own rules about monogamy and about what that looks like. And I have no judgment of people who feel like for them it works to have an open sort of relationship. And I think I personally wouldn't consider that infidelity, because if both people are above board and agree that it works for them and that it's okay